Early August 1941, at the height of Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion of the Soviet Union, Stalin sat in his office at the Kremlin, hearing about Soviet defeats and German advance every single day. This changed as one man walked into the room. Nicolay Kuznetsov, Admiral of the Soviet Navy, one of the most overlooked figures in Russian history. He put down on Stalin's desk a map of the Eastern Front, proposing using the island of Ozo in the Gulf of Riga as a base to directly bomb Berlin. This will be done by the Soviet Naval Air Force. Desperately in need of some counterattack measures, Stalin immediately approved of his plan. So therefore, on the 7th of August 1941, Kuznetsov ordered 15 DB-3 long-range bombers to take off. Under seriously harsh conditions, these planes dropped the first ever Soviet bombs in the German capital. Kuznetsov carried on 9 more similar attacks. Although the damage on Berlin was minimal, it was an enormous morale boost to the Soviets, and a big strike on the German confidence. Had the same effect as the American Doolittle raid on Tokyo in 1942. Well, this was because the Soviets didn't think they had a chance to fight back. However, Hitler was very furious about these attacks. He wanted to destroy all of the Soviet Navy as revenge. Kuznetsov clearly interpreted the situation. He predicted that there wouldn't be any major naval confrontations with the German Navy in the narrow seas of the Baltic and the Black Sea. He thought Germany's main focus was in the Atlantic. He was exactly right about this. So he mainly used a retreat strategy. He wanted to prevent the fleet from being captured from land by the fast-advancing German army. So he retreated the Baltic fleet along major ports, evacuating the army as well, and finally stationed them in the city of Leningrad. Similar thing happened in the Black Sea. Kuznetsov made sure that no equipment, ships, personnel, or technologies were left in the ports for the Germans to take. He got the Black Sea fleet all the way to near the Caucasus to prevent them from being attacked by the Luftwaffe, which posed as the main threat for the Soviet Navy in the Black Sea. His actions effectively preserved the strength of the Soviet Navy. This included their large capital ships like the battleship Sebastopol and their Kirov-class heavy cruisers. This provided condition for further Russian Navy development after the war, since you can't really expand your Navy if you lost it. Now, one of the reasons why the Russian Navy was able to become one of the most powerful in the world after the war was due to their little loss during the Second World War. At the same time, Kuznetsov ordered Soviet submarines to attack German merchant ships in the Baltic and the Black Seas, since Germany needed the Swedish iron ore and the Turkish chrome ores through these two merchant routes to support their armored industry. Now, these submarine campaigns were not the most successful. For example, in 1942, the Baltic fleet sunk 21 merchant ships, but at a cost of 12 submarines. I have to be honest here, Kuznetsov was no Chester Nimitz or Karl Dönitz. He wasn't the greatest naval officer of his time. However, his campaign was largely forgotten, and it did make an effect on the German industry by striking at its essential supply lifeline. Kuznetsov also supported the Soviet army on land. On the 18th of October 1941, the Soviet High Command called on organizing 25 Marine brigades to fight on land. Kuznetsov immediately transferred 40,000 of his men to respond to these. These men became the main strength in the defense of Leningrad, Stalingrad, Sebastopol, Moscow, and took part in many major operations of the war. By the end of the war, 350,000 Soviet sailors had fought on land alongside the army. They provided some vital support to the Soviet final victory. Even today, the Russian Marines are still considered some of the best forces in the world. As we can see here, Kuznetsov also made some important contribution to the victory on land. Also during the war, Kuznetsov reorganized the Red Army Naval Air Force. He divided it into sections belonging to fighter aviation, naval bombers, naval assault aviation, and torpedo bombers. This greatly improved coordination within the Navy and increased battle efficiency. The system provided a structure to organize the Soviet Naval Air Force for many decades to follow. For his service for his country, Kuznetsov won a lot of medals. These include Hero of the Soviet Union, Order of Lenin, Order of the Red Banner, and the Order of Ushakov First Class. When we look at the life of Kuznetsov, inside Russia, he was regarded as a hero. Outside of Russia, he was very largely forgotten. Based on my experience, many World War II history books today fail to mention his name. I personally think that's very unfair for the man, since he made some really important contributions not only to World War II, but to the development of the Russian Navy as a whole. In memory of him, the Russian aircraft carrier, commissioned in 1991, was named Admiral Kuznetsov, binding Kuznetsov's name once again to the Russian Navy, as he himself once mentioned before. My whole life has been the Soviet Navy. I made my choice when young and have never regretted it.